Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be focusing on Marvel's first family, that is the Fantastic Four, and specifically we're going to be taking a look at issue number 51, This Man, This Monster, from Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's groundbreaking initial Fantastic Four run. Our story opens with this tragically positioned image of Ben Grimm, the Thing, as a downpour of rain slides off his rocky body. And I think this visual does a wonderful job of setting the scene for what this issue is going to be. It's not your typical superhero story, but it is instead an exploration of identity, alienation, and the corrosive nature of envy. And so Ben Grimm is wandering the rainy streets of New York, and in his internal monologue he says, "I'll live and die just the way I am," lamenting the fact that he's trapped in this rocky body and framed by Jack Kirby as this solitary figure who, even against the large and impressive backdrop of New York City's architecture, seems large and out of place as he walks the streets. And because he's standing out so much, his silent musings are broken when two police officers approach him in their vehicle, and recognizing him as the Thing, I mean, how could you not? But they see that he's kind of in a state and they try and help him. They offer him a ride, but the Thing rejects all of this help. Eventually though, he ends up on this stoop, and when the door opens, this man offers the Thing the chance to come inside and get out of the rain and have a coffee. He then tries to relate to the Thing by saying he also knows what it's like to be so lonely and sad of heart. I will say, however, that there is definitely probably one part truth to that, one part performative empathy, because as we will learn shortly, this man has some ulterior motives. But before that, we also learn that he is a scientist, and he has this fixation with Reed Richards. He even says, "I wish I had Richards' money and his equipment. With his reputation, his fame, his assets, he can accomplish seeming miracles." Which also, I'm not sure if Kirby and Lee were trying to get deep into this, but that is an interesting point to bring up about this sort of fundamental tension that there is in academic and scientific circles, and how there can be a disparity between institutional privileges and raw ability, because this guy is saying, if I had the resources that Reed Richards has, I could help so much more than Reed Richards does. And then of course from him we get sort of a more classic villain line where he says, "After tonight they'll laugh at my theories no longer. I'll have proven myself at last." This is, however, after he has slipped something in the coffee that he gave Ben Grimm. Ben Grimm has passed out on the couch, and now this scientist is about to use a machine that he's created to steal the appearance of the Thing. That way he can psychologically triumph over Reed Richards by intellectually and emotionally beating him, because ultimately he wants to prove that he's superior to Reed. What I don't really see discussed about this though, and it is probably because it's a minor thing, but this is also an interesting route that they went, because it really throws back the physical cost of Reed's scientific ambitions in his face. Now this issue is ultimately about the Thing, Ben Grimm, but it also does force Reed to face the consequences of his work. Also important to note that the scientist states that he has spent a lifetime working on this apparatus that he uses to take the Thing's powers, and that he spent the past few months planning to get the Thing to show up here, which was alluded to earlier when the Thing says, "I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm being pulled in this direction." So this is all very calculated. And seemingly, Ben Grimm appears to emerge from all this with his greatest wish granted. The scientist's transformation into turning himself into the Thing leaves Ben restored to his original human body. But as we'll see shortly, this is actually going to lead to some further alienation and identity issues. We cut a few days later to the Baxter building, where Reed Richards is feverishly working on a device that is going to get us humans up to speed with light speed, which I really like this as a result of the Galactus storyline that just took place earlier in this series, because Reed essentially makes the argument that Galactus, the Silver Surfer, all of these cosmic beings can just show up to Earth on a whim. They traverse the galaxy like it's nothing, and humans are so far behind in being able to defend ourselves and fighting for what's right because we have not been able to access light speed. And finally, the Thing shows up to the Baxter building, but it is not our Thing, it is the impostor scientist posing as the Thing. And there's this nice Reed characterization moment and a bit of irony here, because So at this point, Ben had been gone for at least 3 days. Now, Reed and Sue would be aware that Ben often withdraws like this when he's going through an emotional struggle, so that fact may not be weird in and of itself. But Reed's response is cold. He says, "We've no time for prima donnas here." He's so hyper-focused on his experiment that he brushes off Ben's emotional state, even though this isn't Ben, but Ben was the one who was going through the emotional state. And soon in this story, Reed is going to ask this imposter thing for help. He's going to stake his life on this. And because he's used to treating Ben like a given, his arrogance here potentially put him at the risk of getting killed. This man, this monster, maybe the real monster, is the emotional walls that Reed Richards puts up. But honestly, I really do like this as a characterization moment for him to highlight that as a weakness for him. I also just want to highlight here that I think Kirby does such a phenomenal job with the artwork here with the imposter thing. His body does seem much more stiff, and it makes it pretty fun for the reader to both see rhetorically this character try and imitate the thing and his speech patterns, and see him in the body of the thing try and imitate that as well. We even see this imposter, as Reed Richards is commanding the thing around to pick things up for him, be surprised at his own strength and have some doubts initially that he could even lift something so heavy. But even when we get the real Ben Grimm back in his human form approaching the Fantastic Four and calling out this imposter, Reed's intellectual arrogance really gets in the way of this. He even says, "You bear an uncanny resemblance to Ben Grimm, but I don't know how you expect to get away with such a foolish claim." Even when he is faced with the evidence, literally right there in his face, he defaults to his logic over any type of intuition or instinct or emotional connection. And Reed's skepticism there does mirror the scientist's own resentment, the imposter. Both these men are prioritizing reason over the human level, the relationship level. And this is all deeply upsetting to Ben, who makes this very funny existential declaration that he's not going to keep banging his head against a stone wall. He's Ben Grimm and nothing can change that, which is maybe something he needed to say to himself earlier. And it's this rejection of one of the questions that were being posited this issue, which is, can identity be stolen? But no, his defiance affirms that his heroism isn't in the body, but it's in the choices that one makes. And this will be mirrored later with the actual imposter himself. It's also very funny as Ben walks away from all this being like, "Suit yourself, play around with the imposter, see what happens, Reed." Reed's like, "Man, he did look like Ben Grimm, and he really does sound like Ben Grimm, but hey, that can't be Ben Grimm." He then goes on to tell the imposter thing, "Don't worry, I trust you with my life. In fact, that's what I'm about to do." Because Reed is about to test out the device that he's been working on, but in order to do this, he has to go through a dimensional entrance into subspace. And basically, he's going to tether himself, and if there is an emergency or any danger in the subspace dimension, Ben is the only one who's strong enough to pull Reed back. So Reed has perfectly positioned himself to be murdered by this fake thing. And we start to see the coldness that the imposter feels toward Reed Richards melt a little bit here too, as Reed has this exchange with Sue about how dangerous this is going to be, and that he has to do this though for the good of mankind. And the imposter's kind of like, "Wow, I always thought this guy was just about the glamour and the glitz of it all. I didn't think he actually took it this seriously, and he would do something like this without the public eye watching him." Which, hey, is maybe an important reminder to us all to not build up enemies in our head. Let's not make people to be worse than they really are. Not saying you aren't valid in having people you dislike out there in the world. I don't know what people have done to you, but I do certainly think it's true that on occasion we can make people in our heads more monstrous than they originally meant to be by misconstruing things that happened and creating essentially false memories and justifications for them. Again, there's bad people out there, so take that with a grain of salt per your specific circumstances. My point is, just don't let hate consume you. Don't let hate for a person consume you, lest you end up in an orange rocky body about to help a man get into a subspace dimension. And as Reed enters the machine and makes his way towards the crossroads of infinity, we get this beautiful collage piece from Jack Kirby. Oh my goodness, I love these so much. Can we just take a moment and really appreciate the artistic inventiveness here? Kirby just always knocks it out of the park. He's so good. But what's not so good is when everything starts going wrong out there and the elements of subspace start hurtling towards the Earth, sucking Reed in with them, and if he strikes the Earth, it's just going to be a cataclysmic explosion, and that would be the end of Reed Richards. and so he begins tugging on his line to get the imposter thing to pull him back. And we see the thought process going through this imposter's head. He's like, all I have to do is ignore that, and I've beaten the one man that I've been thinking about my entire life, really. But something has switched within him at this point. Seeing Reed in person, seeing what they're doing, and he makes this comment where he says he's never seen things so clear before, and it's now like he's really become the thing, not just an imitation, which really wild non sequitur for a comic analysis video, but this, in the context of 2025, makes me think of Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal. But like in that show, if you're unfamiliar, the participants will meticulously roleplay scenarios to try and avoid real life failure, only to discover that no script or planning can account for authentic emotion and real experience. And where this story started with our Ben Grimm lamenting about his identity, now this imposter is lamenting about his true identity, saying he didn't do anything worthwhile his entire life because he'd been so focused on Reed Richards. But now that he's Ben Grimm, he can really be Ben Grimm and do something. He can save Reed Richards. He can make it all worth something for the greater good. Unfortunately, our imposter spent too long thinking about this and the tether snaps. But what he does is he makes the heroic and brave move to jump into the subspace dimension himself to try and help Reed get out of there. And when Reed sees that this imposter has jumped in here who he thinks is Ben, Reed is very upset because it means it's going to be the death of both of them, and Reed really does care about Ben. They are a family. Regardless if Reed doesn't know always how to emotionally showcase that. And again, this imposter the whole time is just thinking, I have spent all these years jealous and hating this guy, and even in his dying moments, he's still caring about somebody else. I ain't even worth his little pinky. And that's where this imposter decides that he too, in his final moments, is going to care about the life of another more than himself, and he's going to do something brave and heroic, and he's going to fastball special basically Reed Richards back to safety. And as this imposter comes hurtling towards the earth, towards his death, we get these lines from him that really do make me feel kind of sympathetic and bad for him, where he says, as for me, I'm not gonna feel sorry for myself. Not many men get a second chance to make up for the rotten things they've done in their lifetime. I guess I'm luckier than most. I got that chance, for I finally learned what it means to have a friend. Aw, that's sweet, that's endearing, come on. We then cut to the human Ben Grimm, who is still dealing with the alienation that he's feeling from being rejected from the Fantastic Four, and he's going over to his girl Alicia's place with the hope that because she's blind, she will be more sensitive to his true self and his real identity than any person with sight could truly be. But right when he knocks on the door, that is when the imposter thing perishes, and thus he's back to his original state, which is, I guess, how the duplicator that the scientist used works. And Ben's initial reaction to becoming the thing again may seem like he's pretty upset by it, and I'm sure there's some truth to that, but I'm not sure that he's really mourning his appearance here. What I think is that he's mourning the possibility of being loved without pity. And he also says maybe Ben Grimm is nothing more than a dream, somewhat accepting his fate and realizing that he will most likely never be in a human body again. But that doesn't make him a monster. He's still deeply human at heart, and humanity is measured by selflessness, integrity, and courage, and many other things, but those core aspects are really highlighted in this issue. And so our one true The Thing makes his way back to the Baxter building, where they are mourning the presumed dead Thing, and I think this moment's really nice because it's something Ben wanted from Alicia when he went to go see her, and it's something that he just wanted from the Fantastic Four initially, which is Sue instantly recognizes him as the real Ben. She can just sense it. And that underscores the fact that identity is not visual but relational. And of course, we get a classic gruff response from Ben where he says, hey, your husband might get jealous, using his humor to mask that vulnerability. And again, Reed is sort of piecing this together like, oh, that's why the other Ben didn't pull the line, he was an imposter. And I think it just is really telling. It's saying even his genius couldn't detect the fraud, and what it took was Sue's empathy to reveal the truth. And I quite like the ending here where Ben's like, alright, where is that freak? And Reed says, try not to judge him too harshly, Ben. Somehow at the last minute, some of your own heroism reached out through the endless void, and touched him. And then we end on the brilliant. We'll never know what monstrous things he had done in the past or what monstrous plans he had made. But one thing is certain, he paid the full price, and he paid it like a man, crystallizing the emotional gravity of this story and honoring the villain's final moments without erasing his sins, but instead affirming that heroism and humanity are not defined by the past, but by the choices we make in the moments that count. Thank you everybody for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That really helps me out algorithmically, so do me that kindness if you got any enjoyment from this video. With that, you guys have a great rest of your day.